For just
This is the time. Yeah. We gotta finish off anything I want to see.
I got it right here.
For the center of the room. And is it live?
And that's.
That's a little shit. Like when people are sneaking in from online.
No, I mean like, if Jim is saying something, is it kind of, is it just like it usually happens?
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 24, 2024 Site Plan Review Committee Subgroup Meeting for the River House Project. My name is Daniel Weir. I'm a member of the Planning Commission and am chair of the River House SPRC project. I have a script that I'm going to read to you, so forgive the formalism as I go through it. Mostly logistics, almost entirely logistics. We'll be holding a hybrid public meeting tonight, which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7, 2022. Members of this SPRC subgroup for the River House project are participating both here and in person, both here in person and virtually through electronic means. This time, I will orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics about how tonight's meeting will be run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided by the SPR webpage, the project webpage, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to SPRC email subscribers. Additionally, there is a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our subgroup members joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during tonight's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. And please keep your phones and devices muted until you are called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. For our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn off your video feed. I will address when it is appropriate to turn it on in a moment. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active to serve two purposes. For SPRC subgroup members who need technical assistance, and for members of the public to add their names to the list for public comment, which will be taken at the end of this meeting. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion. Those who are planning to provide public comment will still need to do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat will not serve as that opportunity. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public comment period. Some additional notes for subgroup members. If subgroup members participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn on your video feed and raise your virtual hand in Teams. We will monitor, with the assistance of staff, will be monitoring the video feeds that are on as an indicator of who would like to speak. If subgroup members are participating via phone today without the video option, please announce your name and the group you're representing now, and we will verbally check in to see if you wish to be recognized, as you do not have the video feed option. Do we have anyone dialing in to the meeting by phone?
Yeah.
So the end-to-end encryption of this meeting that will be on YouTube is not broken. For our members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment, you will be called upon to speak at the end of the meeting and will be allotted 2 to 3 minutes to speak on tonight's agenda item. The exact time we will be announcing when we get to public comment. My apologies that we do not have an exact time up front. The priority is for people at the table to be able to give comment. And when we get to public comment is always a bit of a moving target. Going off of script again momentarily, a reminder that tonight's meeting is advertised until 9:30. That doesn't mean that we are going to go till 9:30, but we are not going to go until 9:31. I'll say a little bit more about how we spend our time when we get to that portion. Thank you. If you wish to speak for public commenters, please enter your name in the meeting chat. For virtual attendees, or provide staff with your name if in person, and you will be added to the speakers list. Lastly, a reminder, and Mr. Matuzik has our public sign-up list. Are you going to pass it around, or are we going to have people?
We can start
what I wanted to highlight is the other sign-in sheet that has been going around, but probably needs to be updated.
Okay,
You'll see two, but one's for the speaker list, one's for the
once for the what?
attendance.
Attendance, okay. So if you wish to speak, we've covered that. And lastly, reminder that this is a public forum. Tonight's meeting will be recorded and posted to the county website. All information associated with tonight's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to Freedom of Information Act requirements. Again, for the record, my name is Daniel Weir. I am chairing this evening. We are going to begin by going around the table and doing introductions. And then I'm going to invite anyone, just because of the number of people, I'm going to invite anyone who is on this roster, and you should know if you are, who is sitting along the edge of the room to introduce yourselves. If you are not a member of the SPRC table, please, I invite you to just pass. You will have, if you are going to give public comment, I will ask you to introduce yourself for the record, so we will find out who you are then. I'm asking this because I am trying to get a count of the number of people who are at the table, and that is going to influence how I manage our conversation when we get to it. Remember, 9:31 is like counting to 5 with the holy hand grenade of Antioch. So we will go to Aaron.
Good evening, I'm Aaron Starpiper, and I am with the Planning Division.
Thank you. Let's come back. Let's go to Mr. Matusik next, and then we'll go. We'll do the table and then the.
Matt Matusik with the Planning Division, Arlington County.
Adam Watson, Arlington County Planning Division.
Jessica D, Pentagon Ridge Condo Association rep.
Joe Trevette, C2E2 Commission.
Jeffrey Williams, Crystal Pentagon Cities Council.
Kim Edwin, Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Nick Giacobbe, Aurora Highlands. Sure. Nick Giacobbe, Aurora Highlands Civic Association rep.
Eric Castle, Crystal Cities Civic Association.
Rosalinda Osgo, I live on 18th Street and own a unit in the Ridge House.
David Osgo, I also live on 18th Street.
Jim Lantelmi, Planning Commission.
Valentina Blisa with Lessard Design.
Murphy Antoine with Torty Gallison Partners, JVG.
Matt Ginnivan with JG Smith.
Belle St. John Day with Raleigh Site Design, part of the design team.
Kendrick Whitmore with Venable.
Janet Meyer, VCT Design Group, part of the design team.
Your Shimmers Park and Rec Commission.
Keep going.
Attendant of the Ashby.
Pass.
Suzanne Boito, Pentagon Ridge. Doris Rippey, Pentagon Ridge. Karen Feely, Pentagon Ridge.
Jens Feely, Pentagon Ridge.
Pentagon Ridge.
Pass.
Sophie Hawkins, River House resident.
David Richards, representative.
Judy Richards.
We're not representing the representative.
Be representative. You are. Okay.
Hi, good evening, Alfred McCumber from Pentagon Ridge Condos.
Peter Stamatopoulos, 18th Street South.
Emma Gonzalez, applicant team.
Greg Bobber, also the applicant team.
Sebastian Chan, River House resident. Robert Gibson, Arlington County DES Transportation.
Michael Cullen, Arlington County Department of Parks and Recreation. And I do have a colleague joining Teams. I don't know if you want to give him a chance to introduce himself.
We'll go to teams.
Okay. Rick Seacott, applicant team.
Paul Clark, Barton House resident.
That's
Anyone on teams?
Garcia, representing Arlington Ridge Civic Association.
Richard Reb, representing the Representative Condominium Association.
Thank you.
Alyssa Tope.
Eric Berkey. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just Alyssa Tope representing the Arts Commission and Public Art Committee.
Eric Berkey, I'm a member of the Planning Commission.
Julie Tippins, resident on 16th Street South.
Brian Delaney, Department of Parks and Recreation.
Anyone else online who wants to be recognized? Great. The one thing I want to ask, I think that we have one, I don't mean to call you out. I do, but I don't, as a matter of courtesy, if there's anyone who's at the table who is not on the roster, I want to ask you to at least make room for, we've got at least one individual who is you're a representative from Parks and Rec, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I would really like it if you could be at the table, if you don't mind. I mean, I'm not requiring it, but it's the sort of culture. I think that, I mean, I think it's just a matter of scooching over. You don't have to move, but you can also stay there, but it'll be easier for.
Can we get more chairs then? Because I'd like to be next to my husband if that's okay.
We can, I will help move the chair over during the presentations. Our first presentation is the applicant, but Mr. Watson, I want to go to you in case there's anything else administratively that we can cover first.
No, the sign-up sheet for public comment should be going around, so there it is. Great. And so please put your name down if you'd like to speak at the end during public comment. That's it.
And I want to also add one more thing, that this is the second most, maybe the most people I have ever seen in one of these meetings.
Yep.
The only thing, the only two that I can think of that are on par with this are the first Met Park HQ2 meetings that were held off-site, and the Virginia Hospital Center expansion that was also held off-site. So this is just a way of saying to everyone here, thank you for your indulgence as we deal with logistics, as we deal with me forgetting people's names and faces, and as we deal with the number of people that are going to want to be heard tonight. So, Mr. Whitmore.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Kendrick Whitmore. I'm a land use and zoning attorney with Venable. Appreciate y'all being here this evening. Just a couple of initial comments I wanted to make. One thing that we have done throughout this process is that we've listened. We've listened to you all through meetings after the sector plan was adopted, listened through the LRPC process, and we've made changes to our plan based on what we've heard. We're going to continue to listen, and we're going to continue to solicit that feedback. This plan sets out objective standards that need to be met. Standards about open space, building coverage, tree canopy. Those are all met and exceeded by this project. Outside of those objective standards, there is flexibility in the plan that we have used to make a great place. One thing that we have not done is maximize the height and density. You will not see that the height and density is at the maximum here. That is not only because we have heard from folks that they do not want the maximum height and density, but also it allows for a diversity of housing and uses that we think is necessary for a healthy market and economy in Arlington and the River House neighborhood specifically. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Belle St. John to go through some of our project.
All right, so Belle St. John Day again with Bradley Site Design Landscape Architect on the project. And so I'm going to walk you through our site planning process where we explored the existing conditions of the River House site as you see it today, combined with those requirements and objectives laid out in the sector plan, starting with the canopy coverage and tree preservation requirements. As noted in the sector plan, an emphasis on the west and south lot lines. And so we recognize the existing tree canopy, calculated condition and canopy of those existing trees along those lot lines.
It's just a lag because of running through teams. So we'll try and advance ahead of time, but
Yeah, and so when you see that pop up, and going to the next slide with those replacements that we have made in understanding the amount of invasive and poor condition trees and replacements on those, we have met and exceeded the canopy coverage that is existing at River House with what we're proposed in our site plan today. It's
this
really
lag's getting worse, yeah.
I can try to run your slides the same that I have.
Yeah, we didn't change it.
Yeah.
No, that's something else. Let's see. That's not it. Oh, there it moves. You want me to try mine, or just since you just moved, do you want me to just let it go?
Let's try yours, but you mind enhance the keyboard just so we can pass through? The mouse, yeah.
Is that working better?
There you go. Yep.
So here you can see, yeah, the canopy coverage, existing conditions along the south and west lot today. You can see a lot of invasive and poor condition trees along those lot lines. And so recognizing that when we replace and reforest the canopy coverage along those western lot lines, you see a net proposed increase in canopy coverage that we're seeking with the plan that's been submitted. And then talking about the overall canopy coverage anticipated with our proposal, excluding what is found with the existing trees at Virginia Highlands Park expansion, and then the far north area we're calling the James Park addition. The sector plan you can see in gray lays out a 15% canopy coverage for a project within the sector plan, but then elevates that benchmark for River House for a 20% canopy coverage. We are achieving with preserved and proposed tree canopy a 27% canopy coverage with our proposed plan. So then layering in the next aspect of that, of the site planning, is the green ribbon and the green ribbon connections. And so you can see highlighted in the blue circles, those destinations and intersection points identified in the sector plan. And so we use those tree corridors that of the preserved and proposed tree canopy to guide the placement of those green ribbons connections, with a primary green ribbon going from the 15th Street spur to Virginia Highland Park, and then the additional ones being the secondary green ribbons. And we really challenged ourselves to provide a truly accessible and equitable experience with the green ribbon, seeking 5% slope or less on our pathways, because even though an 8.3% ramp is acceptable by ADA standards, it really is a challenge for many users to use true ramps. So we really try to minimize the locations of those true ramps to our biggest grade changes, where we have 25 feet of grade change at reaching the 15th Street spur, 14 feet of grade change to get up to the Hume steps, and really have created this biophilic experience. So the last piece, as we keep layering on that green corridor and the green space, is those open spaces laid out in the sector plan, the Virginia Highlands Park expansion and the North James Park, and really creating this green biophilic experience with those preserved trees, immersive experience along the, as the sector plan goes out, the forested space along Lynn Street, and then how that connects to the metro, creating that casual use space. So you can see those identified here. And then the voids that are left there is then starts identifying the building placements for those. So just going back to those requirements laid out in the sector plan, we highlighting some of those, the 20% canopy coverage, we're meeting and exceeding with a 27% proposed canopy coverage. 2 acres of public parks are met, and then equitable access to green spaces, parks, and other natural elements. We are providing nearly a mile of accessible green ribbon on the River House site alone, which is almost a third of the 3 miles that the sector plan looks to achieve throughout the entire Pentagon and City area. You get almost a third of it here on the River House site. And so going from those illustrative diagrams that we have seen in the sector plan and really digesting and bringing them to reality with the proposed plan is understanding that our placement of the green ribbon, using that existing pathway that runs behind the Potomac and the parking lots, using that metric to identify the placement of the green ribbon along that contour to create the truly equitable space, guides the placement of that green ribbon and mitigates the about 65 foot of grade change proposed in the sector plan illustrative if we were to circumnavigate all the grade changes along there. And so really creating that truly immersive biophilic space where we're minimizing ramps, built elements, handrails to really immerse and celebrate the River House site. And a similar concept with the placement of the primary ribbon, primary green ribbon, is understanding the existing trees at the 15th Street spur. Those mature canopies, unless you want to remove mature canopy, really readjusting where that prospect is to Virginia Highlands Park by just a little bit, you get that unobstructed view to Virginia Highlands Park and create a more equitable and accessible site through this space. And that dimension of the green ribbon, providing 45 foot in our most constrained condition, when the green ribbon lays out 16 foot to 32 foot in its widest condition, really meeting and celebrating the goals of the sector plan. And so our next slide, sort of shows that prospect, that slight adjustment still allows the view to Virginia Highlands Park and this green accessible a space that allows more users to access it and enjoy the amenity. And so our site plan now, this is how it is laid out in our current proposal and the changes we made through the LRPC process and where we are today. So I'm going to turn it over to Murphy.
Great, thanks, Belle. I'm Murphy Antoine. I'm a planner, an architect, and president with Torty Gallison Partners. And I'm going to be talking about the North Land Bay, which really goes from the Potomac up to the James with a couple of multifamily buildings, the N1 and N2 in between. And this really builds on what Belle described in terms of the connections, the green space, the natural connections. Looking back to the sector plan for guidance, you see the illustratives from the sector plan, which talk about the height and the mass and the location of the buildings that you see in 3 dimensions on the left, and then in plan on the right, and looking to that for guidance. So we've taken those footprints from the illustrative sector plan site plan, scaled them up to the mass that the sector plan allows, and those are those footprints described at that mass looking above West Oak. Now we're proposing a mid-rise density in the North Land Bay. These are those footprints taken down to that mid-rise height. What I want to do now is toggle between that and the proposed. And if you could actually go back once and twice, Matt. And so the illustrative from the sector plan and the proposed, and starting to see the articulation of the different heights, the 2-story, the 3-story, the 5-story, the 7-story versions, and the articulation of the architecture along that. So there's been a lot of discussion about the facade length. This is a diagram of those facade elements, the vertically expressed elements called for in the sector plan, different massing, different articulation, and how that occurs in a rhythm across the buildings. And you see no longer than 60 feet of unarticulated or facade articulation that doesn't change. Taking that same diagram approach and applying it on the casual use space as you go up the hill, you see again a similar articulation and how that renders itself when you start to see the materials and the details. This is a view looking down from Lynn back to West Oak, and now we're sort of at the opposite view looking up the hill back to Lynn Street and starting to see that 26 of the 62 feet of grade that we're navigating with the accessible route that Belle described. The building to the left also accommodates some of the mixed use that was requested. This is the Virginia Healthcare System, the emergency and urgent care, and the building was designed and the access designed for it to specifically accommodate that. You can see some of the details of what that provides here. The last thing I wanted to talk about in the North Land Bay is that dimension between the 2 buildings, this promenade to get to the metro back and forth, replacing the stairs that are there now, and then comparing it to the more retail mixed environment on the other side of Joyce, which is 151 feet from building to building at West Oak. On our side of Joyce at N1 and N2, we start at 145 in that experience. As we navigate up the hill, we bring that space to 97 feet, building face to building face. It's a residential and casual use space, not a food and beverage destination. And then a zone for those private balconies, but it's 83 feet of width in the casual publicly accessible use space. Comparing that to other spaces, you can think about Water Park on Crystal Drive. That is a destination space that goes from 45 feet to 85 feet. We think of the High Line in New York, again, 30 feet to 60 feet. Really great spaces, really great places, forming that space with the detail. With that, I'll turn it over to Janet to talk about the central part.
Hi, I'm Janet Meyer. I'm a principal with BCT Design Group, and we are focused on the central parcel, which is the space in and around the Ashley and Potomac buildings. BCT was engaged on this project specifically because of our experience in mid-rise multifamily projects and our expertise in senior living design. So as we developed the design of the central parcel, we focused on recommendations and requirements from the sector plan, specifically focusing on the primary green ribbon that runs through the central parcel. And we looked at making sure that there was an unobstructed line of sight from the vantage point that Belle alluded to, adjacent to the 15th Street spur directly to Virginia Highlands Park. We also focused on the recommended green ribbon width outlined in the sector plan, indicating a 16-foot typical width upward to 32 feet at its widest. And because of this primary route between our buildings, we have exceeded that 32-foot dimension, providing a minimum of a 45-foot green ribbon with frontage zones for the buildings on either side. So we're really looking at a 60-foot wide to 100+ foot wide open space that really does meet the requirements and exceeds the requirements set forth in the sector plan. From a massing perspective, our building forms are really shaped to create openness along the green ribbon, chamfering the edges to really get those sight lines increased. But really it's about the typology. We could have a maximum of a 250-foot building that's shown for that for-sale condo site, senior housing and multifamily housing at 16 stories. But for the typologies and the diversity that JBG Smith is really looking to put forth in this site, we really needed to shape these buildings appropriate to that typology. And that is especially noticeable in the senior living building. Senior living has a very specific care model that goes with the associated aspects of that typology. And it really sets forth your entry points, your operational adjacencies, your ratios of units on floors for staffing and efficient staffing to really care for those residents. So those are the types of things that we really use to set these footprints and to get those types of projects in this market and in this space. It really is what's going to make the requirements of the density of these buildings really make it work to be able to get them here. So our renderings show the architectural character that we are proposing. They are influenced very much because of the Ashley and Potomac buildings that are very much a part of this central parcel. And if you look at the views that we're showing, you can look at the next image that is looking west from Virginia Highlands Park up through our green ribbon to the green space, and you can see the vantage point adjacent to the 15th Street spur in the distance. The next slide is really taking from that opposite view. So standing up on the vantage point at the top of the forested area and that direct line of sight to the to Virginia Highlands Park. A lot of green space there that's clearly accessible for the public. And then finally, just showing a view along the south side of the site where our 7-story multifamily building, the neighborhood scale, really starts to step down from the height of the larger high-rise to the multifamily, down to the townhomes and into the single-family community of Aurora Highlands. So really looking to reduce that scale. And with that, I'll turn it over to Melody to talk about the south parcel.
All right, thank you, Janet. Good evening, I'm Melody Nobleza with Lazard Design. JBG has engaged our services to introduce diverse housing to the River House neighborhood. The current site is currently occupied by tennis courts and surface parking situated on a sloping terrain. The sector plan mapping shows the height and density that we are allowed. However, JBG's focus has been creating varied housing types rather than merely maximizing the density. To achieve this, we've introduced townhomes in the southern portion of the site. We have carefully positioned the buildings to preserve existing mature trees while increasing green planting in the southern area. We've incorporated green ribbon network that offers pedestrian and bike paths connecting to surrounding neighborhoods and trails. The streetscape includes pedestrian paths and 3-line streets on both sides, enhancing the overall walkability. Preserving the existing tree canopy is a key priority in our design. We've strategically planned the site to retain as many mature trees as possible, while also introducing new plantings to boost green coverage throughout the development. So we are providing housing options that previously did not exist. Drawing from our experience with home builders, we've developed a unit mix that appeals to a wide demographic of home buyers. The current plan includes 150 units with approximately 518 bedrooms. These renderings illustrate the street level experience, highlighting how the integration of street trees and sidewalks create a welcoming pedestrian-friendly environment. Thank you.
That'll wrap it up. Thank you all. Thanks so much. We're going to go to the staff then. We'll talk about the logistics.
I wonder if I just switch to this. Everybody, can you see on here, or is it? It's on Teams. Yeah, okay, great. See, full screen mode. Now, okay.
No.
Yeah,
What?
I think what you have.
Sorry. Try that again, sorry. Okay, back up. Thanks. Okay, great. My name is Adam Watson. I'm with Arlington County Planning Division. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about the process. I'm going to talk a little bit about our policies and zoning, give a very brief sort of summary of where staff is on the project overall, and then talk about a couple of key site and building forum policy deviations that we have. I think we have a respectful disagreement with the applicant about whether or not this project is conforming to the sector plan goals and recommendations. So I'm going to walk through a couple of those. And then I'm going to end it with just a brief recap of some of the points that we've already raised to the online engagement in this presentation as well. So we just wrapped up our first engagement for the SPRC, which is our online engagement that ended on the 22nd. We got over 1,000 comments, 300 people participating. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who did that and participated. We're here today with our first meeting on October 24th. We plan to have 4 more SPRC meetings, most likely. However, we don't know exactly when those will occur. I think what we hear from everybody in the room tonight will help inform the process going forward. The same thing for a public space master plan process that would cover 2 of the public spaces to come with this. We again have a disagreement with the applicant about the parameters of those spaces. And so at this point in time, we're not exactly sure when we'll have those planning efforts, but we do plan to have them at some point in the future. So, okay, so talking about the sector plan and the zoning a little bit here. I just wanted to say, the Pentagon City Sector Plan is our overarching guide for future development policymaking on this site for the next several decades. So not for 5 years or 10 years, but more like 30 years. And so it's just important for everybody to keep that in mind as we walk through this about what you want to see on this site for the next generation. I apologize because it's a little bit washed out, but there are essentially 2 kinds of diagrams that show up in the sector plan. I'm going to spend my time mostly talking about the development framework, which is shown here on the left-hand side of the screen. The illustrative plans that are shown in the sector plan are artistic renderings that capture some of the things that are in the sector plan, but not necessarily all of the guidance that's in the sector plan. So just important to keep that in mind as we go through the presentation. So I'm going to start by talking about the building in the public realm edge. This is sort of the crux of what we're talking about tonight. This diagram is in the sector plan and it shows where the fixed build-to lines are supposed to be. Those are in solid gray. Variable build-to lines are dash gray. Our destination public spaces, future parks, are shown in green. There's also this gray arrow here. It shows you our unobstructed line of sight that we're looking to have from the 15th Street spur down to the expanded park area, and then also the green ribbons. So when we were going through the sector planning process, the order in which the priority was placed on getting these things starts with public space siting, and then getting our green ribbon routes, making sure that this primary route from 15th Street down to Virginia Highlands Park is an unobstructed landmark in its own right? We're looking for something that has a width beyond what you would have the normal building separation, right? Something that clearly links 15th Street down to the expanded park. In addition to that, not shown here, but mentioned in the text box are tree canopy zones along the western lot line and the southern lot line. 60 feet from the western one, and then from the southern one, it's 40 feet. And again, the purpose of that was to take out invasive species or trees if they're there,
but allow for a buffer, allow for future planning, allow for future tree canopy growth. Once you've done all that, then think about building placement. Okay, so to just get really technical here for a very brief second on the build-to zones and the frontage requirements. The sector plan has fixed and variable build-to zones. The fixed ones are the solid lines. The variable ones are the dashed ones. But regardless of whether you're talking about fixed or variable, you're talking about a overall width of 8 to 12 feet maximum. And within that zone, you want to have the face of the building present for at least 55% of the parcel edge. So the variable build-to lines were allowed to have some flexibility between the endpoint alignment, but the overall width of these zones shouldn't really be expanding beyond 12 feet. So the purpose of this, again, is to enhance the pedestrian experience and make sure that we're getting appropriately shaped and sized public spaces. Sector plan also has building coverage maximums, and the applicant presented on this. Just to clarify what that is, it's the portion of the site area occupied by building mass at any given elevation above grade. So there's two different criteria in the sector plan. For the 5th floor and below, the maximum is 55%, and the applicant is at 50%, which is good. They're meeting it and above it. And for the 6th floor and above, it's 40%. So the applicant is at 36%, also in compliance with this particular objective criteria of the sector plan. Sector plan also lays out guidance on building heights and facade lengths. It limits the overall facade length of a building that's 8 stories or less to 250 feet. So even if you have balconies or changes in plane, materials, etc., the overall length of that facade should not be longer than 250 feet. If you have an 8-story or higher building, 300 feet is the recommended limit in sector plan. So it recommends that building height should be varied. It talks about how taller buildings unlock opportunities to increase the amount and the quality of public space. And what that means is you have a given density, you can either go horizontal or go vertical. As it goes vertical, that frees up more space on the ground plane for public space, parks, the green ribbon, etc. I can come back to this table as we need to during this discussion, but this sort of demonstrates what the proposed heights are of each building relative to what the sector plan would allow. And as the applicant mentioned in their presentation, they are not aiming to achieve maximum heights here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but if we need to come back to that, this illustrates what the height potentials would be in a couple different locations. Just real briefly with respect to zoning, the Pentagon City Coordinator Redevelopment District is the corresponding chapter of the zoning ordinance to the sector plan. But the county board is going to approve a specific land use mix or additional density, which this project is requesting. They need to make 3 findings, and those are here towards the center of the screen. And the one that I was going to focus on the most tonight is that the project needs to adhere to the development framework for land use, transportation, public spaces, and site and building code. So that's how the sector plan relates back to the zoning ordinance. Okay, so jumping into some staff analysis here. So one area of respectful disagreement with the applicant here is that we are disappointed about the overall level of density being proposed to be achieved with this project. We have heard some concerns about density and height, to be sure. We've also heard the opposite. We've heard people who are very concerned that there isn't more housing happening here and the buildings are taller. And the reason is because one of the goals of the county in our comprehensive plan and also in the sector plan is to increase our housing production, near transit, where we're going to support multimodal ridership, and also because that would generate additional affordable housing for us when you're talking about aiming to achieve 10% affordable net new units on the site. So they're not achieving the maximum building height or density. Again, from our perspective, that's a disappointing thing. The chart on the right-hand side basically shows you what the base density is under the sector plan, and then shows you what the maximum would be. And where the base is 0 and the maximum is 100%, we're at about 22% of the range. So another important thing that I'm going to speak mostly about tonight is that because these buildings tend to take up more horizontal space than vertical space, it's having a lot of negative impacts, again, from our perspective, on some of the key parks, plazas, and green ribbon segments that are supposed to be delivered as community benefits through this project. So speak more to those over the next couple slides. So the first one is in land base CNS. Again, the applicant alluded to this and showed that view shed earlier. This is the primary green ribbon. And again, as I said earlier, this is meant to be the connective tissue for everyone, pedestrians and cyclists, residents and non-residents, to and from Virginia Highlands Park and broader 22202 community. And so it's also meant to serve as a landmark in its own right. And the most important thing that we're trying to achieve here with the green ribbon across all the sites is the continuity of the connection, ensuring not only just the sight lines, but the pathway and the experience are continuous and they're easy to navigate and they're visible. And so the sector plan is shown on the left-hand side here, and we have overlaid the proposed green ribbon route in green, and then showing where this view shed should be. And we would just note that we have a different opinion here, that, you know, really the goal was to have a view from top of the hill to the park. And so all of this has sort of shifted to the south. And that's one thing that we want to hear from you on tonight, because from our perspective, this view shed is a bit obstructed, and this was not really the intent of what the sector plan was aiming to achieve in this location. So continuing on with that same sort of comparison between the two, when you look at where the variable build-to zones are, and then you keep in mind that those zones were meant to be a 12-foot wide zone maximum, our perspective is that the building footprints are exceeding these zones and they're encroaching into public spaces. And the space that you're left over with, in particular between C2 and C3, is something that's a much greatly reduced width compared to what the sector plan showed. Another thing that's happening here is that due to the building placement, we think that the pathway or the routing of the green ribbon itself is overly circuitous, unnecessarily so, because you're having to jog around buildings, cross the street multiple times, where the sector plan is trying to minimize those things. So I'm going to speak a little bit more about that in detail. And these are also available to come back to for our discussion, but this is zooming in on the area where the O condominium building is and the townhomes. So this pathway is relatively compressed. It's not as wide as it should be, and we're not having areas of respite or places where you could stop and take in view as the sector plan recommends. There's no separated bike path throughout this segment. That's something that the sector plan also recommends having. We're concerned about this crossing here mid-street, right next to what is supposed to be the garage entrance for the O condominium building. And so just overall concerned about the path quality and its visibility, its navigability. I just spit that out. Moving to page south, but this is really actually to the east, to in between C2 and C3. Again, the face-to-face width here, I think, you know, we have a slightly different measurement than what the applicant presented. It's around 40 to 45 feet face-to-face. The width of that actual public easement that's going to be granted is only 36 feet wide. Again, we feel like this should be a much more generous landmark type of treatment here, where there should be separated modes, especially where it's more busy and congested in between the two buildings, between micromobility and bikes versus pedestrians. If there's going to be a combined width path, we'd like to see that at least be 18 feet wide for the entirety of the segment. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to talk about Land Bay N. This is towards the north. We're moving up towards Army and Navy Drive. So sector plan guidance here, just note that there's a T-shaped 1 acre park or public space that's called for up here. This is separate from a tree canopy zone that's within that 60-foot buffer area that I was speaking about. And again, I would note that there are fixed build-to lines that align with West Coast Plaza on the opposite side of Joyce Street. Last thing, just recall the limit, the sod limit that I mentioned previously, about 250 feet. And this gets really busy and technical. We'll also come back to this if we need to, but the gist of it is that these buildings are encroaching into the tree canopy up here at the top. The length overall of N1 and N2 are over, well, N1 is 353 feet for those who can't see in the back, and N2 is about 332 feet. And so what happens here is that as this building massing moves back, it's having to push the green ribbon all the way back up towards the edge of the site. You lose the ability for there to be any park space back behind these buildings. We talked about the width in between these two buildings at LRPC, and the applicant did widen that space from 70-ish feet to 90 feet. But again, we would note that if you're looking to mirror the width of West Coast Plaza across the street, which is what the sector plan is recommending, that width is more in the ballpark of 150 feet. So again, all of these things work together, whether you're talking about facade length or you're talking about the fixed build-to lines or the tree canopy zones. It's all about trying to achieve this this park and this forested area that are adjacent to South 1 Street. So this is sort of more conceptual way of capturing basically what I just said. So on the left-hand side, I've sort of overlaid what the sector plan would show on top of the civil engineering drawing. So you can see there's sort of a T-shaped space, wider down here. There's more space up here. The green ribbon would come down closer to South Joyce Street, which would bring those who are traversing it a little bit closer to West Coast, a little bit closer to Joyce Street, and then back up. Versus on the right-hand side of the screen, what's happening here is that we think that this is a more narrow space, and the green ribbon has, of course, obviously been pushed further to the west. Okay, so separate from any issues related to the building placement or the length of the facades, is our belief that this area back here at the top that's being counted towards, I've highlighted that was a bit crude. I apologize for not having a better graphic, but this area is being counted towards 1 acre of a park, when in fact, from our perspective, this is a green ribbon segment that leads stairs to the plaza. So our opinion is that this public space is probably closer to half of an acre as opposed to 1 acre. All right. Lastly, I'm going to conclude with some thoughts on the townhomes and the Land Bay S area. So as I've mentioned a couple times, there's this idea of a tree canopy buffer, a tree canopy zone along these lot lines. In this case, we are looking at the townhomes that abut the western lot line. You can see how those are encroaching into that area. And on the bottom, the red dash line is also showing that 60 feet. You can see from the tree removal plans what's happening there in terms of removal of trees. Again, if it's invasive, that's okay. We want that removed, but it's foregoing the ability to have new tree canopy in this area, right? So that's the concern from staff. Lastly, when you talk about the sticks of townhouses that are on the western and the southernmost edges of the site, you have a situation where there is no continuous planning strip and there's no adjacent on-street parking. You have 2-car garages for each of these units that are disrupting the streetscape. We anticipate, each of these black arrows indicates a parking entry for a garage in a townhome, and we expect that there probably will not be much sidewalk or frontage zone use. We expect that folks will probably just be parking their cars here, disrupting the sidewalk, setting up the basketball hoop, which is all great, except for that we're trying to create something that has a more urban environment and not 54 curb cuts. So we're looking to work with the applicant to have the parking for these townhomes be arranged in a different manner, whether they're consolidated or perhaps they're loaded from the rear, so that you have a better, greener, more urban streetscape along the street fronting these townhomes, and then entry either, like I said, from the back or perhaps from underneath. There's probably multiple ways to figure that out. So that's another concern. Okay, so perfect. Okay, so just onto the recap. The building edges we think should be placed within the build-to zones, and the facade length should not be exceeding 250 feet for a building that's less than 8 stories. We think that the building height should be more varied and that there should be taller buildings in the appropriate locations to unlock that density potential. We'd like to see some additional tree canopy and plantings along the western lot line and the southern lot line. Clearer sight lines and easier navigation for pedestrians along the green ribbon. At least 1 acre of actual park space for the N1 and 2 public space. And then building form, especially in Land AS, that's more pedestrian oriented and not as auto oriented. I think that should cover it all. And Daniel, that concludes staff presentation. I do have a slide here that shows discussion.
Yeah.
Agenda if you want me to do it. Yeah.
So just a couple of quick administrative questions. Mr. Jacoby, it's Nick, right?
Yes.
Forgive me, we've been at the table before. I have a query on file, so I just wanted to confirm. Thank you. Do we have anyone here from Forestry and Natural Resources, from Transportation, Housing, HRLB, Economic Development, or Ridge House Condo? Going once, twice, that's it, okay.
You'll have a person.
I know that Ms. Haynes will be here. I just wanted to wanted to make sure.
Give a hand raise online.
Bridge House is online.
Bridge House is online, and is that Mr. Schick? So, Mr. Wellman, were you planning on being the representative for Ridge House tonight?
For tonight, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, for tonight, yes. Mr. Schick is on an airplane, he can't attend.
Okay. All right, thank you. So I want to make sure, again, just making sure I've got everyone accounted for. Mr. Shitter, I think you're the only person in the room not sitting at the table. Fine, but and Ms. Ray, I saw Ms. Ray come in. I see you. Okay. I just want to make sure I know where people are. What I want to do tonight is to make sure that people have an opportunity to ask questions and to raise issues concerning the placement, the form and height of buildings and how they shape the public spaces. A really critical point, this is not the last chance to talk about these issues. It is the first chance within the context of the SPRC. We will continue to discuss. Our role tonight is to identify areas where consensus exists and areas where further discussion is required. We do not take votes, and I will try to keep us away from back and forths. But given the number of people who signed up for public comment, I also want to get started with public comment no later than 9 p.m. That means we have 61 minutes, and with over a dozen people at the table, that's about 4 minutes per person, which means if you take more than that of floor time, you're taking it away from your colleagues and neighbors. So I'm going to go around the table and give everyone an initial opportunity to ask factual questions. Please keep them brief. We've got a lot to go over. And I will ask you to defer if I think that you're getting into making points. I also ask that you introduce yourself and your affiliation the first time you speak for the record and the benefit of me and each other. After that, after factual questions, and if you don't have one, I invite you to pass. I want to go around the table again for discussion, ideally going around twice, but we will be guided by the clock. And for actual feedback, areas where you want to hear more at future meetings, concerns, things you like, etc. Breaking your feedback down into some kind of category, either by land bay or by heights, footprints, placement, etc. And so with that, we'll start.
Okay, first time, so bear with me.
And please remember, just
Jessica D. I'm a board member at the Pentagon Ridge Condo, which is located on 15th Street, which is what you guys want the green ribbon to be, which we really, really think is a horrible idea, especially being the main green ribbon. I know. So I'm trying to put it into the form of a question.
Okay, thank you.
So
just factual questions.
Right. So I understand, but nothing in here, and so this. I'm trying to figure this out. Nothing in here, actually, you keep talking about the 15th Street spur. All your images are up to 15th Street. You don't actually talk about 15th Street itself once you cross the border of the River House, and that is a big concern. And so the question would be, what do you envision that piece of it looking like? How do you envision that connecting? Because that is something that we believe to be a problem. I guess another question would be regarding the tree canopy. A concern and therefore a question has to do with removal of mature trees when you are planting new trees. You know, you're putting in trees that are 5 feet high and going to take another 30 years to create that barrier that we are speaking of. So those are, I guess, a couple of concerns. My other questions, I guess, I have questions, but I guess it doesn't apply because it has to do with like plans for infrastructure and stuff. So that might be at a later date, but
Yes.
okay.
Probably. So if there isn't a single slide that answers the question about the 15th Street border issue, I want to ask that be put into the category of things that we follow up on.
I can
Yeah.
verbally speak to it briefly if you guys want to chime in, but we asked that a sidewalk be added on 15th Street on the north side.
Yeah.
And so there are plans for a 6-foot wide side.
I think it's an 8-foot
8-foot
sidewalk.
wide sidewalk. Right, and then you would connect to go south, crosswalk to go south. So there's an 8-foot proposed sidewalk to connect to the green ribbon. I don't have a diagram to show that, but that's what's in the plans.
Thanks. And then as far as tree canopy, I think that has its own.
Landscape.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. We'll come back to you. Don't worry.
So I'm here representing the Climate Change, Energy, and Environment Commission. These topics, I do not have.
It's Mr. Tribbett, right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Williams?
Jeff Williams with the Crystal Pentagon Cities Council. I would like to know if it's possible to increase the building heights in the end parcels by possibly 1 or 2 stories to create the larger public open space between them. That's my question for the north. And on the center parcel, my concern is about the alignment and kind of view shed. It looks to me in the renderings that it's kind of a pinched situation, and so the kind of generous view, you have to be aligned just right in order to see it. It looks like that's very hard to achieve with the current design. So I guess my question is, how locked in are we on that? Can that get changed? And then as a primary green ribbon, if there's going to be pedestrians and bicycles there, I really agree with the staff that they should be separated.
Mr. Gibb and Mr. Whitmore, let me know, perhaps it's best to sort of answer some of these questions in batch to sort of keep them coming and maybe get sort of multiple birds with one stone. I'm asking. You can deal with the end building's height now, or
sure. Yeah, no, I mean, I think.
Or do you want to do it with other topics?
I'll defer to you. Yeah, I think the answer is not with that housing type, right? I mean, I think that's something we're trying to balance, is how do we fit in these different housing types within the overall context. If we certainly could go to higher rise construction, on the northern parcel. It just shifts us into a more expensive construction type, which will then push us towards more of the studios and 1-bedrooms and junior ones that we have on Crystal Drive. The current design is focused more on full-size 1s, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, we have some 4 bedrooms. And to do that, we need to stay in a mid-rise construction type. And then I'd say the question on opening up that view shed, that was something we definitely worked on that during LRPC and that chamfer. I think we're always willing to look at if there are ways we can improve that. I think one of the things we're just bumping up against is how do you continue to have feasible buildings on either side of that? If we make many more reductions, we might just need to lose one of those buildings entirely.
Matt, is it worth mentioning EHC in the end buildings in that design?
I mean, that's more related, I think, to the ground plane, right? But yeah, that building has also been designed for VHC too as well.
Yeah, the VHC aligned building looks to me like it's aligned okay with respect to
Sure.
across
Yeah.
the street.
Yeah.
It is the N2 building that does the encroachment.
And can we take an extremely quick moment just to make sure everyone is, we've had a lot more people join, just to make sure everyone is on the same page with the VHC.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I know that we'll talk about that more, and we didn't want to, this is more about the height and building massing.
I know, it's been mentioned, so now.
Sure. Yeah. So, one of the pieces of feedback right in our initial listening sessions, this goes way back, was a lack of medical services right in the neighborhood. People fondly remember the old doctors at River House. And so and there was also, I think, a concern and trepidation that we might try and do the same type of retail placemaking we're doing on Crystal Drive here at River House. And there was some concern about like another nightlife district, right? And I think that was an area where there's a lot of alignment. When we talked to our retail team, we're making tremendous investments on Crystal Drive to make that an 18-hour district. And we actually saw that there was a need for more retail serving, neighborhood serving retail here. So we proactively reached out to VHC, and it turns out that they are looking to expand the service. It's a combination urgent care and ER. However, this is not, there's no code 3 ambulance traffic. No one is arriving here in an ambulance. But what it does allow is if you have a medical issue or condition, you're not having to make that decision between an urgent care and an ER. You can go there, and anything short of life-threatening, they can treat you there. However, if you go in with chest pains and it turns out to be a cardiac arrest, they can put you on an ambulance and get you to the main hospital.
Yeah, my last note was that I'm very happy about that use. I'm very excited.
I'm gonna pick on you because we're friendly. Save that for after we go.
Is it facility?
Let me get back to you on that. I think we'll have Adrian Stanton, who's with VHC, will come and present the full details, and I'd like to give him the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you. For people online, for Mr. Shinners, for Ms. Ray, I'm gonna go around the physical table. I'm gonna then call on you, then I'm gonna go online to our 5 people online. So Ms. Van Heim.
Hi, thank you. I agree with all of Jeff's comments and.
No, you don't. You're asking questions.
Oh, I agree with his questions and I appreciate your responses so far. And my particular concerns are.
What are your questions?
First, how the western and eastern ends of the main green ribbon that goes between two buildings, C2 and C3, how that winding part goes up over to 15th, and at the bottom end, how it goes to River Park, and how you figure out a better connection between Big Joyce and Little Joyce.
I take that partly as a question, partly as feedback. To the applicant, do you want to answer the question?
Well, the question was just how does it get up there? Or
I don't really understand. It seems very convoluted. How can
what's the total amount of grade we're dealing with there?
So, yeah, we're making 55.5 feet of grade change from VHP up to the 15th Street spur. And so that requires way more distance than we have. Even if we ran a true ramp from VHP up to 15th Street spur, you couldn't make the distance. And so what we're doing, and why you see some switchbacks when we get to the true ADA ramps, is try to make up that distance in that tree preservation zone, respecting that. So we've been working with urban forestry with a solution. So I think we're planning on that one section. When you're coming between C2 and C3, you have a 12-foot wide multimodal pathway, and then you have an 8-foot pedestrian pathway that also serpentines with it. So you have those two connection opportunities. So anywhere that multimodal path is, you do have an 8-foot offshoot sort of crossing it to allow pedestrians safe access. And it matches with the language of the sector plan that says that those two things can co-locate together in that section. But then to make the transition, that last 25 feet up to 15th Street spur, we've been working with urban forestry and have been talking about potentially a boardwalk solution that circumnavigates and comes in true ramps to create or embrace that forested edge and biophilic experience using natural materials to circumnavigate and make it. So that's why we're emphasizing when you're at the prospect, you're seeing the destination as laid out. But then, yeah, you have one series of switchbacks that's very, very constrained to just one small segment. And we've got it planning on planting it with native species, so you're really getting that immersion in nature.
Mr. Jekyll.
Yes, a couple of questions. One is on the requirements
that are guiding the footprint of the senior building, is that actually an assisted living or is it how apartments for older people? I'm trying to understand what the requirements are that are driving that. I was going to say one thing for you. So one of the reasons why we engaged PCT and Janet specifically is that that's not a project we're going to build, right? That's one we're going to need to find a partner with for. And so our mandate to Janet was, how do we set this up so that this can accommodate a flex of AL, IL, and memory care? Because we don't yet know who's going to be the developer and owner and operator of that. So.
Yeah. So I've been working in senior living for 25 plus years. And so I've worked with a lot of different clients on the different typologies. The way that we have planned this, to Matt's point, is approximately 180 unit independent living, assisted living, and memory care building. That's sort of the sweet spot that we are seeing in the industry, working with multiple clients on what they see from a care level. So that's the way it's planned. That's sort of the reason why we have portco shares where they are, where we've created and located our operational core. And you have commercial kitchen functions in here, and there's a very specific requirement for the layout. But operationally, it is anticipated, at least in our preliminary design, to have a developer and operator come in that can provide that full level of care. That is not, there's no skilled nursing care, and that's typically, I mean, that's what we see right now is that most communities like this are not doing skilled care, but it covers the gamut from independent memory care.
Great,
So
thanks.
not to pick on Mr. Jacoby, but to pick on Mr. Jacoby, I want us to try to be as tightly as we can focused on form, height, and placement. These are good answers to good questions, but for the benefit of other people, try to keep that in mind.
My second question is on the townhouses. Have you looked at putting the parking underground rather than 54 garage doors across? Again, I think that's one of those things that may be physically possible, but not if we want that that housing type. Again, that's not something that we're going to build. We as a REIT, we actually cannot do for sale housing. So we'll need to go to a home builder to do that. And that's not that they have specific models that they do based on what their customers want. And that's, again, why we engaged Melody. Her company has, I don't know how many different home builder clients you've worked for. Yeah. But so, and again, it's obviously an entirely different world than senior housing, but it's analogous in the sense that there are specific requirements for that housing type. And it's just that what you're describing is physically possible. It's a different problem. Right. And that's what they're building. UIA is building at Crystal House. I encourage you to look at that. Interesting. Okay.
Mr. Cassell?
Yeah, just a quick question on the
name and affiliation.
Eric Castle with Crystal Gateway or Crystal City. Crystal City Civic Association. Sorry. My question is about the straightness of some of the green ribbons. I noticed right where near, I understand you have to go through the curves up the hill, but before you get that, if you could show the graph, and I kind of want to understand how straight it is just before you start going up that hill.
Here? Right here.
Yeah, right here. It looks like it's very circuitous, and I'm wondering if there's any way to straighten it out more so that it's not, going here and there.
I think we've started exploring how it is coming from that switchback that's sort of the necessary evil, unfortunately, to do the 25-foot grade change. We are looking at sort of that transition zone there to, sort of address some of the comments we've heard. But then as you go, continue down that space, I think I don't know how many times you've explored meandering paths, but oftentimes meandering paths really, you still get users just wanting to go straight. And so we're sort of balancing that idea of the meandering path with what users are actually going to end up doing. And so that's what's sort of creating that alignment, is that balance between, we want people to embrace and not rush through the space. The same thing with bikes. We don't want bikes rushing through the space. So sort of trying to blend that balance of, you want to slow people down, but they're also just going to have to walk in a straight path.
So that meander in between, like in the little
right there.
That is, I think, solving some grade, right? Because if you do a straight shot there, which you can do, we also have stairs.
Right.
So if you want to do the straight shot, you can do stairs. But if the meander gives us a little more run, to lessen the slope.
Yeah, we have
Okay,
a,
so there is a slope there. It's just not as steep as the other part.
yeah, it's about
There's
7
slope, there's
feet.
slope on the entirety of this.
Yeah, it's about a 7-foot grade change. So yeah, we have a ramp on one side and stairs.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Lentami, I think you're next, but forgive me, are either of you the representative of your, okay, great. Mr. Lentami.
Yes, Joe Lentami, Planning Commission. My question is about the, so I guess it's the western end along where the townhouses are. I think that there is a county right of way behind that or along that border that's also utility easement. Have we factored that in? Because that is a de facto buffer, green buffer. We factored that into any of this as far as having placement and for, you know, essentially credit for green space.
We have taken no credit for that. That will exist, but we have not taken any credit for that. I think maybe we factored it in just in terms of the survivability of some of the trees, right? That they'll have that space, yeah. But we have not factored, we haven't taken credit for any of that green space.
Okay, and for the county people, for the staff, does the county have any plans for other than what it is now? That it'll remain simply an undeveloped green utilities because it's an overhead line?
The plan, I don't believe has any guidance for that area. Yeah. The 60 feet question is, the sector plan is measured from their property, not from county's property.
But it's there, and I think.
Yes.
You know, yeah, Tori, I'll make comments on that after, but that was your question on the status of that.
Sure.
And Ms. Ray, I did not intend to skip you, but I should have gone to you before Commissioner Lentami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm most interested in hearing more about the improvements to accessibility in the site and buildings and in the path travel, the pedestrian infrastructure that will lead to public transit, not just the buses, but because of this location to the subway stations as well, and to amenities, and more about building accessibility, common areas, and the number of fully accessible units, particularly because I recall that some number of the affordable units were redesignated in zoning from locations in Crystal City. I'm not remembering. I think it might have been Crystal Plaza, but don't quote me on that at this point. That the affordable and affordable accessible units were going to go over to River House, and I'm concerned about hearing more about that. And I will note in concluding at this point that the assistive listening system in here isn't working well. And at one point it wasn't working properly because it wasn't picking up. So I wasn't hearing everything. But so will there be a recording, by the way, of this?
Yes, this will be available on YouTube, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so we will also have, we will have a meeting that is dedicated to both, among other things, but there will be a meeting that the agenda of which includes both affordable housing and accessibility. I think that, you know, we're all going to have thoughts tonight and when we get to transportation on the public space aspects and the pedestrian aspects. Mr. Schinner, I want to get to you for questions and then we'll go to the.
Can I say one thing about where we're meeting? This happened before I was at the meeting, so maybe we could investigate the rooms on the second floor where the system was not a retrofit building.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's something that Mr. Watson and I will discuss in planning for upcoming meetings.
Hey, I'd like to ask the applicant to list the factors and the order of importance to you. They convince you to go with less than the maximum height with respect to much of the housing.
We can't hear you. Do you mind speaking up?
The question was, what are the factors that led us to not maximize height? I'd say it's a combination. One was after the sector plan was approved, we did go and listen to, feedback from our neighbors and our residents and other folks. And that was definitely a factor, right? Understanding that height was a major concern and knowing that we'd be coming to this meeting in the future, right? And we'd get those questions. That was definitely one factor. Another factor, but probably the bigger one, is looking at how we diversify housing across our neighborhood. We, by virtue of the portfolio that we own on Crystal Drive, we have about 1,600 units of high-rise apartments that we've recently delivered or are under construction. We have another 3 towers and 2,000 units that are entitled and shovel-ready behind that. And we wanted to find a way where we're able to broaden the demographic of residents, renters, and owners who are able to both attract and retain. We've definitely heard about holes in the housing options we have in our market, in our neighborhood. And so that prompted us to go and look at, is there demand for these other housing types? And then the feedback we got from the market, from folks who develop senior housing, develop townhomes, develop condos, really strengthened that conviction that these are really housing types that are missing. And then another one is just cost and thinking about how we're able to balance the feasibility of these projects. When we switch from mid-rise to high-rise construction, there's about a 33% cost increase per unit. And so planning for mid-rise allows us to build larger units and build them sooner, rather than waiting for rents to increase to catch up with construction costs.
I had just a couple things from the site plan perspective and then the North Bay, that these mid-rise densities, these mid-rise footprints are particularly well-suited types to build into that hill, right? So there's, we talked about the 50 feet of grade from Joyce up to Lynn, which lets us do 7 stories on Joyce, 5 stories on the Lynn side, bench into that hill in a building that feels part of that and forms this connection, as opposed to imagining towers built into the hill. It's not a form that makes sense for that kind of grade. And I would say from another site design factor is it actually helps frame that view and that experience better, because it really shapes that space, makes a public room, which there is also discussion of in the sector plan. It's what all the build to lines are about, and we totally support that, making the public space, making the edge, and these are scale of building that makes that space understandable and enjoyable.
Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Shear? Okay, thank you. I believe we have Berkey, Tope, Garcia, Reb, and Wellman online. Commissioner Berkey, we're going to start with you because you're the first name I have on my list. And then we will go to Ms. Tope.
I'm just going to yield my time to the other participants. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I will similarly pass. My questions have already been asked.
Thank you. Ms. Garcia.
Hi, thank you. Kateri Garcia representing Arlington Ridge. I did have a question for the applicant on buildings N1 and N2. I know we talked about kind of that the one side not having extensive green space. Can you talk a little bit about whether it's possible to kind of reduce the amount of space inside the buildings in order to allow more space on the edges, kind of more public open space versus the private space?
Physically feasible, yes, and I think it's just always with all of these, it's just trying to balance all the competing interests and make sure that there's still a viable floor plan that allows us to build the building as well.
And a space that actually doesn't feel too wide.
Awesome, thanks. Second question, sorry, I forgot to say I had two questions. So on the applicant slide deck, slide 9, if I'm looking at that, it seems to me, and based on some of the questions that were asked earlier, that the green ribbon is planned to be accessible. Am I understanding that correctly? I mean, just looking through, I see that's obviously why there are switchbacks. We've talked about that. Down by the Hopper Memorial Park, are those switchbacks in red to allow for the ramps for, you know, individuals in wheelchairs, or am I understanding that correctly?
Right, yeah, that segment allows the accessible route with true ramps, just navigating some of that grade change there.
But 100% of our green ribbon is accessible?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Is that it, Ms. Garcia?
That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Rep?
Hello. I think I have 3 questions. One is, I realize this is not architectural, but I think there is a point about site context. So I've wondered whether the applicant and the county have thought about the context of the Pentagon Row across Joy Street relative to the N1 and N2 buildings. Pentagon Row is 5 stories. And along this section of Joy Street, it would make sense to me anyway, that N1 and N2 be 5 stories to match. As you head down further Joy Street, then on the Pentagon City side, it does go higher. So higher buildings are appropriate there, but not on the northern end. That's question 1. Second 2 is really a question for probably the county relative to the developer, which is the Pentagon Row Plaza is a heavily used space by families. If you go by there, you see a lot of children playing in that space. And my question relates to the plaza now on the other side of Joy Street. I agree with the county of making it a larger space, but I'm unsure of the exact uses that are intended there and how that's going to relate to a now busier Joy Street and people walking across that street between the 2 now public spaces. So that's a consideration to think about. Lastly, I have a point about the canopy. A lot of discussions about canopy, but not about lot coverage. I've raised the issue before that this plan increases lot coverage by like 50%. And what originally might seem to be a very reasonable idea of putting housing on the River House parking lots has gone much beyond that. I would think lot coverage, which the county is now starting to talk about, at least in expanding the width of the green ribbon, et cetera, and the space behind N1 and N2, would be more important to the county because it relates to public services that may be impacted by this development, such as storm water runoff, et cetera. And
Mr. Rep,
so I think
ask you if you're coming to a question.
So the question is, how is lot coverage prioritized relative to tree canopy?
I think I'm going to go with the county on number 3, and then work. You want to start with 1? Okay.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in, but from a staff's perspective, the challenge with answering question 1 is that it presents a false comparison. The process that we are in right now is not meant to compare what's proposed for River House to the existing conditions across the street, because that would suggest that only River House can develop guidance in the sector plan, Pentagon City. The reality is properties to the east can also redevelop, and therefore in the future, the entire area will look very different. So the purpose of how we verify compliance, consistency, compatibility is not to just look at what's across the existing, across the street and the existing conditions, but rather what does the future look like for those parcels if and when they were to redevelop according to the same sector plan. So that was question 2, and I can also spill into question 2, which deals with the uses, and the sector plan intention to try to expand the list of permitted uses in this area of Toy Street, make sure that the streetscape can be as activating as possible. It does not prescribe any specific ones. That is up for the applicant to figure out and market. But we try to be as flexible as possible in this portion compared to some of the other ones that are more residential in nature.
And then there's the question about
Lot coverage.
prioritizing lot coverage vis-a-vis tree canopy. That
I think we had to meet both, and we're under the lot coverage maximum, and we're over the tree canopy minimum. And I know, Richard, we've talked about this stormwater question before, and I know Carlos from Bowler's on. The good news is we're required to have improvements in not just the reductions and not just the quantity of runoff, but improvements in the quality as part of our development. So I think that's an area where we can unambiguously say, and that's code. That's it, irrespective of the sector plan, that's just code. I can say that's an area where unambiguously we'll be improving.
Okay, thank you. I want to go to Mr. Wellman.
Yes, just a quick question for the applicant about the western tree canopy area. When I look at the plan, it's not obvious how you are going to fit in the green ribbon pathway on that very steep slope in such a small area.
Remind you of the rules. Do you have a factual question?
Yes. How are you planning on fitting the green ribbon in there with the slope and also burying the power lines? I would just like to understand how that's possible.
So yeah, speaking of the green ribbon, we're sort of using the premises of the existing pathway to start the alignment of the green ribbon. And then the areas, and so yeah, trying to sort of use that at grade in much of that area. And then the areas where we have the tree preservation and the green ribbon sort of weaving around it. Also with our coordination with urban forestry, that's where we've been talking about the decking solution. So we're not impacting those critical root zones, but creating a level walking surface when the existing topography is at odds with that creation.
Thank you.
Green ribbon is under the canopy. So the other piece is, this is a 36-acre site. So there's a scale challenge in just how we visualize and look at a green line on a slide or an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. That there's been a lot of detailed work to make it accessible. So we're looking to preserve the canopy. So we're looking at that in great detail. It's just really hard to see with a little line on a 36-acre site. But Belle and her team have gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure that all of that works.
Thank you. All right. So people understand why I'm trying to move people along. We have 28 minutes and 15 people for generalized substantive feedback. So I encourage people to be economical in your comments so that we can start public comment at 9. We have 16 people signed up for public comment at 9. So thank you for bearing with me for the arithmetic. Ms. D, I'm going to go back to you for just general comments and feedback. Remember, we're trying to get as many issues to the applicant and staff as possible so that they can come back to us with improvements.
Are we supposed to sign up to speak at 9? I did not sign up, and I would like to speak at 9 public comments.
We'll pass the list down.
Again, I live in Pentagon Ridge, and we have a couple of main concerns. One is the green ribbon. Every part of the green ribbon that's been discussed is the 15th Street spur, and that seems to be nothing but problematic. So when you already have the stairs going up in the middle, which everybody's been using, you have Army Navy, you have Hume School, and you have the road, that comes up from River House. Why is it so important to shoehorn this thing that doesn't really work very well into this space? That 15th Street is essentially our driveway. And I say that with safety concerns, right? It is extremely steep, as everybody keeps saying. That is how you get in and out of our driveway. And the idea of creating more traffic that is coming up through there all the time, biking, walking, rolling, first of all, nobody's going to want to, you may do the switch back up to 15th, but nobody's going to want to get up 15th. The sidewalk that he's talking about is over here and the new crosswalk is over here. So, and our sidewalk is also not good for people. So it just, it really doesn't make sense to us why this is being looked at as like the primary point of the green ribbon. We have, again, real safety concerns with the amount of traffic, and as well as the fact that like when we move in and out of our building, that's where trucks park. When we have people working in the building, that's where trucks park. If you have people constantly moving up and down, that is going to, you know, really affect the functionality of our building and our life. The other thing, I mentioned the mature trees. First, I want to go back and just say I appreciate you guys have been listening. We've seen some of the changes, acknowledge that. I really appreciate the observation that the staff has made in terms of that buffer. We think that's very important. I mean, I'm on the second floor. I look at trees. Like, yes, I can see the river house, but if I wanted to, I could walk around naked, right? Don't want to, but don't want to have to get curtains, right? That buffer is very important for that, you know, for the, whatchamacallit, I can't think of the word, you know, to go from dense to not dense. So keeping that there, keeping the mature trees and not just saying you're going to put in trees that are going to be appropriate height in 30 years is very important. I didn't really talk about the view, but I would like to see possibly in the future slides that show our view in terms of the condo building, the townhomes, how that will be specifically, how that will be affected and changed, shifted for us. We're a short building, obviously, and just other things for futures infrastructure questions. But yeah, safety, especially along 15th Street, is important. We just think that there's, you have other paths. Why go there? So that's.
Thank you. And we will be revisiting most of those issues in future meetings. But thank you for raising that.
So our commission is tasked with fighting climate change. Obviously, a pretty big task. Within housing, one of the key factors to fighting climate change is density. Buildings are more efficient with energy, with water, with utilities, with higher density, and we have to preserve land outside of the city, out of urban density. So I do agree with some of the feedback that to increase density, because it is pretty, to be in this area and building at 5 stories seems pretty odd at this point, especially in Pentagon City, which I do live in that area too. So I just for the quick comment is that we would also support higher density than what is proposed right now too.
Thank you. Mr. Williams.
So I really think the public open space is really important, and I would like to see the vision sector plan achieved, but it looks like it may come at the cost of maybe the density that's proposed in order to achieve that. And for the reasons he said, I'm troubled that that means that we have to give up housing for public space. And I think that going higher for the density, I align myself with his point of view.
Thank you. I think JBT Smith.
Louder, please.
I'll try. I talk softly, sorry. I'd like to thank JBT Smith and his hard work, and for county staff for your hard work on this. Great job. This is a very challenging project. First, I want to say that overall, I agree with the staff analysis about what the issues are. Secondly, I'm hearing a lot about the topology and how that is impacting things. And we are seeing too much drawings and we're not seeing the topology. So I would like to see some graphics that actually show, okay, so you've got trees here, you've got green ribbons there. How does that all work? How you've got places on the green ribbons where it's critical to do a certain way because of the grade change. I can't see that on the 2x2, so things like that. And you made the point about the N2 and N1 buildings, how they build into that. We can't see that on the drawing. That would be really helpful. And that is really an issue to show it. And my final is if I could just make one change, it would be do something about building 0. Oh, the condo building, it really seems to be causing a lot of problems on the site, especially with the Green River. And if you could move it, make it change the shape, something that's really impacting. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I like the ideas that are done on open space, the green space. It's great to see that you're beating the tree canopy requirement. I encourage you to really focus even more on how those green ribbons stay together and make sure that they are fully accessible all around the site. We talked a little bit about view sheds, and I think we're looking not only at the view shed of 15th Street, but the view sheds of the people who live in the existing tripods, the tripods, as well as the folks who live on Ridge Road. I think their view sheds are also important. And I appreciate that you've pushed it down in order to accommodate the view sheds of the residents who are there right now. And finally, kudos on including the townhouses. They're pretty boring, but if you can spruce them up, they'll be better. But more housing opportunity purchase is even better. So thanks for including those.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I just wanted to mention to everybody, make sure they understood that the green ribbon idea came from the community, from the livability guidelines. And so we were the ones who really pushed the idea of a green ribbon to start off with. And we want to thank the applicant for really incorporating this tremendously throughout the site. And this is something that when we originally did the livability 2202, we were really thinking about is how we make sure that as pedestrians, we can get from one place to another via a very enjoyable experience versus a hardscape sidewalk. And so we really appreciate that. Having said that, at the same time, a green ribbon is not a park. And so to the extent I agree with the county on that one part, you want to count them separately. The green ribbon and a park are two different things. And lastly, just between C2 and C3, that's always been and then going up to O, that area is one that I agree. I would like to see something better to explain how it goes. Because I understand there's topography and there's a variety of things. And when we were there, I sort of got some of the idea of the problems in a physical site, but kind of seeing on the map, you go, oh, it's going crazy. And you go, well, that's not right. But then you get to the site and you understand what's going on. So again, something topographical would be really helpful. So at that, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ray, you still with us? And then Carolyn, I'm going to go to you after Ms. Ray.
You're next. Comments? Do you have any general comments?
Okay. Commissioner Haynes. Commissioner Latami, I'm going to go to Commissioner Haynes first.
Apologies for not being here, being double booked tonight.
Let me get you to step as close to the table as you can, just for microphone pickup.
Very well. Yeah, and I'm sorry not to have missed the presentation, but I looked at them all very carefully ahead of time. Forestry and Natural Resource Commission is very disappointed in the way this plan is progressing. And I think we very much agree with the staff analysis of such a missed opportunity. And, you know, we all work so hard on the Pentagon City Sector Plan, and to not see that this as the big first project coming out, to see this is really a huge disappointment. And the more buildings we spread out, the less of the green public space and the trees that we're going to have. So anyway, just we're very much in alignment with the staff. Thank you.
Yeah, Jill Antoni, Planning Commission. I pretty much agree with the consensus going on here that the green ribbon is the signature element for the plan. And I was one of the co-chairs for the Pentagon City Plan when it was being created. And I've also talked with Jane Siegel, who was my co-chair on that, and she agrees on this. The green ribbon, again, it's the signature element. We have to get it right because this is the first one. If this isn't done right, it's going to have an effect on every other applicant that comes into the portion of the green ribbon. So it's really important that we get it right at this site because, as was just said, this is the first one out the box. I think part of the reason why it isn't the way we want it to be, and I agree with staff's analysis, is that we're not getting the density on the site we need. We're not getting taller buildings. We're getting shorter, squat ones. We don't have the difference in heights. They're all pretty much the same. They're the 5/2s, which are great on Columbia Pike and Lancaster Boulevard, but for this area, they're really not the right form. It doesn't take advantage of what we can do here. So that's a concern that I have. That really sets the pace for everything else that just isn't making it the way it really can be and should be, given what this site is and given its proximity to the metro and other transit. even VRE for heaven's sakes. So, I would rather see more density on this site so we can get what we need out of the open space, the green ribbon, and other things. Now, I like the basic townhouse neighborhood. I think that's a great transition area. I think that's a well thought idea there. The form, we can talk about that later, but the basic concept there, I think works. Yes, I think that pretty much sums it up. I did a lot of these comments on the online engagement, so it's really just emphasizing what I've already put down on the record. But yeah, more height here would work, more varied height. It doesn't mean that every building has to be really, really tall, and maybe we have 1.5/2. But all of them, it just doesn't work for me. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Chinger, we're going to go back to you next.
Okay, well, in interest of time, I'll just say that the Park and Rec Commission also shares the concerns that Commissioner Haynes has with respect to the failure of the current plan to follow the Pentagon's city sector plan. Density and tolerance.
Thank you, Commissioner. I think that next is Commissioner Berkey. Cattery. Did I miss you?
I'll go. Yeah, I'll go quickly, Mr. Yeah, I'll go quickly, Mr. Chair, just to say I completely align with. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep. Okay, I just want to say I completely align with Commissioner Lantelmi about the concerns about the green ribbon as well as the density. If we're not able to max out the density on sites like this, I think that should be quite concerning for kind of our future and thinking about meeting our housing needs, but also balancing that with a lot of our communities, strong desire for lower density neighborhoods. This is the type of site where we need more housing. Not sure that there's anything we can do to persuade the applicant in this scenario, but that's something that I think should be of great concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia.
Thank you. So, again, Arlington Ridge Civic Association, obviously I have a lot of our residents here, both from River House and all the condos and also some of our single family homes. We have obviously a wide range of concerns and diversity of concerns. So I'm just going to speak to some of the common ones. I do think, I do support the idea that we have diverse housing in our neighborhood. I think that's incredibly important that we have different housing at different price points. And so I appreciate that the applicant has attempted to do this. And I hope as we consider increasing density that we keep that in mind. I think that's really important. That said, I also think, obviously the community members, as you could see on the online engagement and here tonight, are very concerned about open space, multimodal and accessible connections through the green ribbon on site. And I would say, and beyond, as you heard some of the condo reps speak to that as well. I think also I really would like the applicant to consider public open space over private open space. I think that could allow us to see some more green space, and I think it's consistent with the way the property is right now. Most of the space is shared by all the community's residents. And also, I just want to say thank you to the applicant for widening the area between N1 and N2, and I appreciate the medical facility. I think that's a wonderful addition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Tope.
Yes, similar comments to everyone else. The only slightly new comment about the green ribbon is I think one of the main purposes of the green ribbon is for it to be a continuous public route through the site. And I agree with the county's comment about how circuitous some of them are becoming, because I think the more circuitous it is, the less the public can see through the site. And if they can't see to the other side of the site, or at least to a place of refuge or a park, then they're less likely to determine that that is a public route that they're also able to take, and it becomes perceived as something that's private or just for the residents. So that would be my point for making it less circuitous overall. And then in terms of the length of the building facades that the county brought up, I think it'd be helpful in the future for the client to talk a little bit more about, as much as possible at this stage, potential plans for the building facades and how they can be differentiated along their length, assuming that they do keep that longer length than 250 feet, about like building projections, change of materials, how they're perceived along the sidewalk by passersby to make them seem less wide and formidable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rebb.
Richard Rebb, representing the representative. I want to thank the comments on view sheds being important, and view sheds are both longer views, which psychologically important, but it's also target views. And one of the views that people on the ridge do enjoy is looking down into the Pentagon Row Plaza and seeing all the children and ice skating. It creates a sense of community, which is very important to maintain here. That is one of the reasons we are saying to take N1 and N2 down to 5 stories so it conforms with the other side. And Matt Matuzik, you've made these points before, but Pentagon Row is not disappearing in the next 20 to 30 years. So there's not a need to build this side up in anticipation of immediate development on the other side. A consideration is if you want more density, certainly one row of townhouses to bridge to the single family housing on the southern end would be appropriate, but you could put more high rises or mid rises in that area to increase the density, because the height of the ridge definitely supports that, and you're not going to be blocking anyone's views in that area. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rebb. Mr. Wellman.
We would just like to thank the applicant for talking to us throughout this process, and say that from the perspective of Ridge House, we're okay with the plan the way it is, more or less. I'm sure there's some work that can be done on the margins, but I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone who is on this roster? Okay. Before we get to public comment, I want to thank the staff for the work that has been done. I want to thank the applicant for the work that has been done. We have come a long way to here. I was appointed chair of this SPRC process potentially before the pandemic. So a lot of work has been done, and I'm glad that we are where we are. And thank you also to Commissioner Lantelmi for chairing the LRPC process that got us to this point. And thank you to everyone here for your efficiency. I know that people are going to say that this process was rushed, because that's a thing that people say, but I think that such a comment would be in error. We have covered fewer topics tonight than is usually done in a single meeting, and taken 2/3 more time to do so than is usually done at a single meeting. The fact of the matter is, this is something people have a lot to say about, and we have done that. I will say substantively, and I'm not saying that this is the last word, it's just that I go last. I don't think that we have the authority to oppose something in the formal sense of recommendations to the county board, because it is not dense enough. Maybe these are minimums that the county needs to explore the authority for, but that is not the matter before us. The question for me is, are the identified goals in the sector plan delivered? And I do not know that I have answered that question for myself yet, but I very much look forward to continuing that conversation with you and with others over the next several months. We have 20 public commenters, and we have 37 minutes. I am going to give each person 2 minutes. That might get us past 9:30. I promise you, I will cut you off at 2 minutes. Please don't feel the need to take the whole 2 minutes if you can simply associate yourself with comments that have been made. Mr. Matuzik, Mr. Watson, I'm going to go to you to call on people.
Judy Richards.
My name is Judy Richards, and I'm a.
Can you stand up and I come and stand up and approach the table, please? Only because I want what you say to be picked up by the mic.
I live on the 7th floor of the representative, and I'm only speaking for myself. I have 3 questions. One is, are you wedded to the flat roofs on N1 and N2? You show 1,700 HVAC units there. Those are individuals serving individual units. It's an on-site roof, and the decibel level will be incredible. If you have 80 decibels per unit, you have 80,000 decibels, 24 hours a day. Are you wedded to that kind of roof, or would you consider something else, perhaps more appropriate, central heating and air conditioning unit under a pitched roof that's attractive, somewhat like, well, similar to the Pentagon Row building. Secondly, I agree with everybody who says that space between N1 and N2 should be wider. I believe it would be really appropriate to concentrate more public space there, particularly along Joyce Street, and create more of a larger plaza that would mirror the one across the street. I understand your need for a certain density. I like 5 stories that would match. The other one, I think it's a more pleasant streetscape for all of us who walk there and shop there. But can you take some density from N1 and N2 and move it over to the designated public park over on Army Navy Drive? That's not going to be very well used. It's a steep slope. I mean, I walk by there, and it's an amenity for your building, but it's remote. People are not going to go sit there and use it. Put a building on that site. Take the density that you require, reduce the density that's being asked in N1 and N2, move it over.
Ms. Richards, that's time. I'm going to indulge you only because you're the first person to speak.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes, please.
Is it possible to add stairs from the upper part of the N1-2 public space up to Lynn Street? All the people who live above would like to have a direct access down to Metro and the shops. Thank you.
Thank you. And either Mr. Matuzik or I, for upcoming speakers, will be shouting out 30 seconds, just so that you can anticipate that and don't feel like you're being interrupted. Thank you, Ms. Richards, for starting us off. Who's our next speaker?
John Paul. Good evening. My name is John Paul Macias. I got a question for the applicants. What infrastructure improvements has the applicant considered to meet the level of service or exceed the level of service for traffic, water, sanitary, and power, given the density, the increase in density for this project? And also, could you please describe the phasing of this project, whereby will it begin with North Bay, Central Bay, and South Bay, as that will affect the parking situation throughout the entire area?
Thank you, Mr. Paul, for your efficient comments. I will indulge. I will just step in to say something I should have said earlier. One thing we don't do during public comment is back and forth. Unfortunately, that means we also don't answer very good and straightforward questions. But all of those are agenda items for upcoming meetings, and the applicants take note of the questions and make sure that they are answered or addressed at our upcoming meetings, even if they are not otherwise on an agenda. That's directed at Mr. Paul, but for the benefit of everyone who is going to ask questions and not get a direct answer tonight. Thank you, Mr. Paul. Who do we have coming up?
Karen Peely.
Hello, I'm Karen Feely from Pentagon. First of all, I'd like to thank JPG Smith for listening to us and everybody in the community when we say we don't want to have very high density. If we wanted to be directly in the city, we would have moved to DC. And I want to thank the county for saying that you need to have more tree space and park space behind the building. So there are areas there. I agree with Jessica D's comment on the green space, and I don't understand why there's not a compromise available where you have the view onto the bottom of 15th Street, but the green ribbon does go up 15th. It goes Army Navy or the steps. And then in terms of density, I appreciate what the county's trying to do to get more people housed, but I think there's an important line to remember here, which is just because you can does not mean you should. And I think that applies here to how much density we put in. And to that point, I would ask that the O building be removed completely. It blocks sights, it causes privacy noise, and is not got issues, safety, security, police involvement issues. And it's not going to sell well because nobody in that building is going to have a view that they want because they're looking into everybody else's unit. And please protect the tree canopy when you take out the sick trees.
30
in the
seconds.
buffer. Please leave to help.
Thank you, Ms. Feely.
Susan.
It's me. I know. My name is hard. I get it. My name is Susan Castrina with Pentagon Ridge. I'd like to concur in Karen's comments, but I'd also like to have a few more questions. You mentioned very briefly putting like a walking path and a bike path up 15th Street. Is that on the existing street, or are you going to be moving it off to the side and clearing more trees? If you're clearing more trees, are you planting more trees also to give some privacy to that street safety? Because it has been mentioned, lots of cars go in and out of that all day long. So it is having space between walkers and where those cars are is probably safer for everybody. The next one I want to talk about, still 15th Street spur. It is a 55-foot elevation change. It is not as accessible as you would hope because I try to do that as part of my therapy and it does not work all the time. Because that is such a steep path, because you do have to go back and forth, what other areas are you considering to have the path on? And would you consider moving it somewhere where there's maybe more space so you don't have to go right up into our driveway, or less steepness involved in it? And then finally, you also mentioned the word equity, equitable views, equitable approaches, equitable access many, many times, but I don't know exactly what you mean by that word in this context. And I really appreciate it if you explain it, because I've learned lots of meanings and don't quite think you use it the way the dictionary does. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Castrina.
Sophia Hawkins.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sophia Hawkins. I've lived in the River House Ashley building for about 4 years now. I really enjoy living there and I hope to continue living there indefinitely, but it kind of depends on this project and how it will affect the quality of life while living there. So I have a background in systems engineering. So as an engineer, I'm going to kind of propose this as a potential solution to problems within the design plan. So something that I do agree with is that I think it's designated as the southern land route where we have the parking lot and the tennis courts. That area, I do agree, that is a good area to be developed. I believe it was the second person that spoke. They brought up potential infrastructure problems. So what I am proposing as a possible solution to that is focusing first, developing that southern land area with the townhomes where the tennis courts and that undeveloped parking lot are. That is a far enough distance away from the River House and does not impede on any of the current parking lots or amenities that could be lost potentially by River House residents. In addition to that, I think the current plan, this would have been about like 2 years ago. The original plan was to start with the senior living facilities that would have been directly in the middle of the River House complexes, which would take away a public children's park, a swimming pool, and a gym. That's why I think starting with those outer edges would be great. And that'll also minimize the noise to River House residents because the buildings are shaped like amphitheaters. And even people living outside, they sound like they're in my own home. So those are things I would suggest.
30 seconds.
And then starting with that outer infrastructure, that gives you more time to focus on bringing in electricity, water, sewage, bringing in that extra infrastructure needed to support all of those additional buildings within the complex. That is my supposed solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins.
Okay, I apologize if I get this wrong. Rauda?
Yes, that's me.
Okay.
Ruda.
Got it right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rita Messman. I'm a River House resident as well. I agree with all the comments being made tonight. I also am curious more what Paul said about more of the private and public parking and also the more of a traffic impact. I want to see a study if possible, what that would look like. And I know that he said that it's going to be on the next agenda, so I look forward to learning more about that.
Thank you, Ms. Bestman. I don't know if it will be the next agenda, but it will be at an upcoming meeting. Just to be clear. Yeah. And who do we have next?
Sebastian.
Hi there. My name is Sebastian Chan. I'm also a River House resident. I think I want to associate myself with the environmental committee here, who was mentioning the importance of density. More housing means that there is more supply, which will help control costs. Housing costs in the neighborhood are really high right now. They have been going up a fair bit over the last couple of years while I've been living here. So I'm hoping that we can kind of mirror the success that we've seen out of Austin, where we've had sustained construction that has really driven down prices year over year for residents there, which I think is a positive thing. Make it more affordable to live there so we can bring in more people and have more diversity in the neighborhood, which will be good for everybody. I do want to also kind of comment on the discussion that was going on about increasing density versus the increasing cost of construction for higher, larger buildings, and just kind of see if there's a way to address both the need to kind of keep things low, to keep them affordable, versus to like build really tall and have it be very expensive. Is there a way that you kind of build a little bit taller so that you can have more units, but not balloon the cost to such a great degree? But otherwise, I think I just want to thank everybody for the work that they have done on this. Clearly, a lot of work has gone into it. And generally, as a resident of the River House building, I look forward to my new neighbors in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shan.
Lisa Tricana.
That's me. Hi.
Hi.
I'm on Ridge Road. And so we bought the Lynn Street outlots that are immediately next to the parking lot. And I guess the way the plan is that entire wild strip is going to be completely removed and never replaced. It's heartbreaking. Please don't do it. Thanks.
Thank you. Daniel, do you want me to keep it in the room or we can go back and forth?
Let's keep it in the room and then go virtual.
Okay, so next in the room, we have Doris Rippey.
Yes, hi, my name is Doris Rippey. I'm at Pentagon Ridge Condo, and I want to speak to the 15th Street spur from the perspective of universal design, accessibility, the elderly, and people with disabilities. There are a number of people in our building who have disabilities, my husband among them, who is participating virtually. I would invite Matt and Belle and anybody else, Adam and Matt, all the Matts, everybody to come over, my husband in a manual wheelchair, and go from Lynn down 15th Street. If you think that it's going to be accessible to people, I see this accessible connections. The icon had strollers, wheelchairs, and a small child on the hand. No, they cannot do that. They cannot do Lynn down 15th Street. If I would lose the grip on my husband's wheelchair, he already just had an accident where he fell from a mobility device, broke his back, 4 ribs, and a brain bleed. If I would lose a grip on that manual wheelchair, he would slip out and just barrel down, and that would be the end of him. We have people with visual disabilities. We have people on canes. We have people on walkers. We have people in wheelchairs. And there's no way that that can be a green ribbon in the way that you intended. Also, we only have a very few parking spots there. And those of us who chose to age in place and redid our whole unit in order to be able to age in place need to have our PT, our OT, our home health people to be able to park in the very, very few spaces that are on 15th Street. Belle, I don't speak the language that you do, so I really didn't understand what you were talking about with 15th Street, but I'll talk with you afterwards to see if you can put it in layperson's terms.
Thank you, Ms. Rippey.
Next week in the room, we have Rosamunda.
Rosamunda also, thank you.
Yes.
So I live on 18th Street and with a family of 4, but I want to talk more about the feedback. We had people who are not here tonight. There was a petition in the winter of 2022 of 2,200 residents of 22202. That's about 10% of the residents. And the feedback on the petition was that the residents would support a build out at River House if it was not higher than at West Coast. So 5 stories, which we've heard, I think Mr. Webb say tonight, I've heard other people say. So I would like to see more discussion on the height and specifically the feedback in the petition that was not to have the height as high as it is for N1 and N2. Particulars. I'd like to see more discussion on that. And I can send you a copy of the petition for those of you who have not seen it. Again, there were 2,200 signatures. The other thing I want to understand why there's discussion tonight about you want the width to be the same as West Coast. And there was a lot of emphasis on that, but you don't want the height to be the same as West Coast. And that seems very selective to me. So I want to understand that. I think, Matt, you addressed the height, but you said you wanted the width of West Coast, but not the height of it. And then I want to also understand on the height. I don't understand the height. Is it 7 at the bottom and 5 at the top of the hill? But then that 7, you're adding retail space, which brings it up to 9, and you're adding decibels of air conditioners on the top.
30 seconds.
Going to bring it up to more like 10. So you're saying a height of 7, but it's more like 10 now. So I want to understand that height. And then I would like to see, I would be in favor of a mid-rise more on the south parcel. So not changing the density, Matt. I think you've been very receptive to what the residents have said about the density. So I think I'm not asking you to change it, but I'd like to see it spread out more and that middle building reduced to what the petition signatures wanted.
Thank you, Ms. Husker.
Thank you.
Next in the room, Peter Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. Peter Stam right here, 20+ year resident, 20202 in that little Aurora Hills area. The discussion tonight about the garages, I think that would be nice to be able to see a little bit more what that might look like. I too have concerns over the height of the overall project here. I think you all have done a good job with that. A rendering from that neighborhood looking north at the project. I'm not sure if you have that, but that would be nice to be able to see what it is there as well. And then obviously we're just very concerned with the increase in the traffic and things like that. So as this goes along, looking forward to seeing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stam.
Alyssa Marlowe.
Yes, hi. So I am a former critical infrastructure planner by trade. What that is anything incapacitated or disturbed would have a devastating impact on the national economy. My understanding is October 21st, Arlington County Fire reported that they had a staffing shortage, and that prompted Boston Fire to go out of service. At the meeting I attended quite some time ago, Katie Crystal assured us that they met the NFPA standards. I'm hoping that you could please re-advise, given the recent staffing shortages on that. And then also, I was the lead planner for the way our entire country responds to an attack on the grid. My understanding is that Virginia's Commission on Electric Utilities met for the first time in 6 years, since 2023, and that the Northern Virginia embrace of the data centers has led to a lack of supply, and the cost gets passed on to consumers like us. Virginia just released their integrated resource plan, which shows that the cost is passed on to consumers. And we've had a number of things I can't actually discuss here that have happened. So I'm hoping that you could reassure all of us that critical infrastructure won't be impacted. We won't be impacted. We won't have any challenges. So thank you.
Steve Miller.
Thank you, Ms. Marlowe.
Okay, so that concluded everybody who signed up in the room. So we would jump to virtual now, if that's okay. So we have Julie Tippins first.
Ms. Tippins, you might be on mute. We will come back to you, Ms. Tippins.
Susan English.
Good evening. I'm hoping that that public bulletin boards would be included in this project. Just as the green ribbon at River House is intended to be an exemplar, a model for integrating the community through physical pathways, it would be a wonderful thing to have civic engagement by having public bulletin boards at a few strategic locations so that people would see them as they came and went, and so that civic notices such as meetings or the kinds of things that are posted at a library could be posted with a agreed protocol with JBG, and that's something that would help to bring all these new neighbors together with the other neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. English.
We try Ms. Tippins again. Julie?
We'll come back after you.
Okay, we have Lauren S.
Hi, my name is Lauren Smith. I'm a resident at River House. I know some of my fellow residents have showed some optimism on like what this project will do as far as rents go for our building, but I'm not feeling that optimism, and I'm a little concerned about the lack of consideration for the human impact for the residents that are currently living at River House throughout the duration of this project. We've seen that JBG has been been named in lawsuits about fixing rent prices through the use of software through like a software called RealPage. So I'm not optimistic that this project's gonna see any relief on residents as far as cost goes, which we've seen go up year after year. I'm also just concerned about the noise that this project's going to create, the ability for residents to continue to live like a peaceful life during it. We're talking about an extreme amount of building, of construction that's going to be happening over the next few years. And it's honestly just, it's a lot when you're thinking about the fact that people like have lives and live here and work here and sleep here. Like, it's just, it doesn't seem like the residents have been considered in any of this. Also, a green ribbon does not replace any of the green space or the green parks that we have right now. One of the best parts of living at River House is that you're not facing into other buildings. You have privacy, you have the ability to not feel like you're backed up against another building. And I think the building that we're talking about, the construction we're talking about, defeats the purpose of a property like River House. Like, you have something really special, and this is just going to ruin it.
30 seconds.
I just can't emphasize enough how left out I think as a resident I feel from this process and the considerations that are being made.
Thank you very much.
Next, we have Paul Binkley.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Again, yeah, my name is Paul Binkley. I'm another resident of the River House, and I want to echo what Lauren said just a second ago, along with all the financial issues. I think JBG is having a very difficult time managing our building as it is right now in terms of the quality of life, and I have a great concern about how much this is going to impact the infrastructure of our buildings, all this construction going on for multiple years, not to mention the fact that we're being charged amenity fees and parking fees when all that is being taken away on top of rent increases. So many of us have a lot of concerns about how this will impact our lives, the quality of life we have here too. So again, like Lauren said, I'm hoping we're going to be considered a lot more in this process going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Binkley.
Tina.
Good evening. I'm Tina. I'm a 24-year resident of the Potomac, and I just have a question about slide 8 of the applicant presentation. I'd like the applicant, because I do have a view of the rear parking lots and the rear of the building toward Lynn Street. So I'm curious whether it is correct that the separated bike lane has been removed, because previous presentations showed a purple separated bike lane going all the way up on the primary green ribbon up to the 15th Street spur. Second is a request. May we please have renderings showing views from the existing buildings, especially those of us on the floors that are surrounded by the C1, C2, and C3 buildings. It feels like we're being blocked and looking into other buildings, and like to get a sense of what our views are from 360 from around each of the existing 3 buildings. And last but not least, I'd like to point out that River House, you can fact check on the Washington Business Journal. River House is already the 3rd largest apartment building in the greater Washington area, not just Arlington. If we wanted to live in such a high dense community, we would have picked Crystal City, Ballston, or Rosslyn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ben DeVonzo.
Hi, my name is Ben DeVonzo. I was also on the original Pentagon City Sector Plan kind of review panel. I agree with the comments that the county has made about insufficient density, particularly insufficient heights leads to the kind of similar heights, the lack of open space and frankly, the lack of affordable housing benefits, because the lower the additional density, the fewer affordable units. And I think that's really disappointing, particularly because this is likely, JBG seems to be making decisions based on current kind of construction costs, and this might not be based on current projects that it has completed in terms of site plan review that are not going forward anytime soon. This might not be built for a decade, and it'd be really disappointing if we're stuck with less than we could have gotten because of short-term decision making. I'll also say that the townhouses, I think they are better in the PDSP version of them from what I remember seeing. And it's disappointing, if I understand correctly, that there is not a unified underground garage. They're doing that for the townhouses at Crystal House. There are many other examples. I don't see why they couldn't do that for this site. And so would strongly encourage that. Overall, the VHP is great, or VHC rather. The improvements are there, but I do hope we can really realize the potential of this site and do not kind of lock this community in for a longer term for something that we could have gotten better.
Thank you, Mr. DeVonzo.
Bernie Byrne.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Bernie, we can.
Okay. This project should have much less density and much more green space. Parks should be larger. Minimize paved surfaces. Enlarge and create parks, not plazas. Make buildings taller to increase the amount of surface green space without necessarily increasing the total density. Add meadows to increase pollinator habits, which the county's overdevelopment has virtually eliminated. Make all buildings real green buildings, not fake ones to get bonus densities without accomplishing anything useful. Add green roofs and rooftop solar panels. Place shade-tolerant plants beneath solar and near solar panels. Add green walls to increase biophilia. Native flowering vines should hang from roofs and balconies and climb from the ground on trellises. The conceptual landscape plans for all three land bays are grossly inadequate. The county board's mnemonic pledge and recommendations and master plans encourage planting native plants to support native pollinators. The landscape plan does not do this by a long shot. The landscape plan contains many non-native plants that survive in Arlington. Its landscape architect calls these plants, quote, adaptive. However, adaptive plants do not feed native pollinators and may become invasive over time. Get rid of them. The landscape plan lacks common milkweed, Asclepias syriaca. This is the most important food plant for monarch caterpillars in Arlington. Add much common milkweed to the plan. The landscape plan contains many cultivars of plants. However, many cultivars are sterile or have altered flowers, colors, and structures. They don't attract or feed pollinators. Do not plant cultivars unless they are more resistant to disease than any native parents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Byrne.
And last but not least, Laura Fewer.
Hi, I'm Laura Fewer. I live in the Potomac building for a few years. I am also struggling with the human aspect from the people who currently live there. One point I just want to make, which is beside all of this, is with the current three buildings, the management and the maintenance, it's just not working. It's not thriving. They're saying they can't fix things. They can't, they don't have the resources to fix the elevators and to fix the pests and everything. So it's just hard to understand how we have the resources for this huge undertaking if we don't have the resources, to get rid of the cockroaches and the mice and the water damage and the mold and the elevators. I'm just a little confused about that. We've reached out to everyone we could possibly find who has a public, could help us, from JBG, from the management. And I'm just confused how we have the resources and the bandwidth to do all this if we can't even manage the three buildings. That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Fewer. Do we have any chance that we got Ms. Tippins back online? All right. Thank you. I went a little bit out of order intentionally because I wanted to see how long that would take. But thank you to everyone who gave public comment. Normally, I would have asked staff to give our roadmap and sort of where we go from here before we go to public comment. I wanted to see how much time we would have. So, Mr. Watson, can you close us out?
Yeah, I mean, so the next steps are going to be us hearing from the applicant about how they're going to be responding to some of the comments that we heard tonight about the building form and placement, including staff's comments. And we'll be taking that information back and meeting internally, and we'll be able to broadcast some future dates for the next SPRC meeting, hopefully in the near future. At this time, I don't know when that will occur, but please stay tuned. My contact information is on this presentation. It's in the staff report. If you want to come up afterwards, just talk to me and give me your card or your number. Happy to connect with you so that you are aware of when the next meeting occurs. And that's all I have to add.
Real quick, what's the topic in the next meeting likely
to be determined?
Yeah. I didn't mean to talk over.
No, that's TBD.
Normally we have a breakdown of topics, but that we have a script that we follow a little more closely. This is this is to be determined. Yes. Based on I'm trying to decide whether or not I have any value beyond to add just beyond what Mr. Watson has said, and I'm concluding that I don't. Other than to say thank you to everyone again for your indulgence, for your efficiency. I think that a lot of questions were asked, a lot were answered, more will be answered. A lot of feedback I think was given and received. Thank you all for staying the extra, hour to 30 minutes to hour, depending on what you're used to for these kinds of meetings. And we won't see you tomorrow night, but we'll see you. Ms. Benheim?
Yeah, do you know if our next meetings are going to be on Thursdays? Or might some of them be on Monday?
We don't. It will typically either be on Tuesdays or Thursdays, but we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're adjourned.
Thanks.
Thank you.